Every time it Pens podcast, a show about all things esports bike racing. I'm your host, Greg Leo. Well, it's just me today. Adam's off racing in the Breck Epic. It's a mountain bike stage race, Breckenridge, Colorado. Adam's currently 2 days into this race. I think he's done something like 70 miles and 12,000 feet of climbing already. And currently Adam is in first place in the Cat 1 category. So way to go, Adam. He's 5 minutes ahead of second place. Unfortunately, he had kind of a bad crash at the end of stage 2. So I'm hoping that he can continue racing. He's a tough guy, so we'll see what happens. Good luck out there, Adam. You can find more about the race that Adam's doing at breckepic.com. Unfortunately, they don't have results there, so I'm just following along on Adam's constantly updated Instagram story. His handle over there is AdamZim11, ADAMZIM 11, so you can keep up with what Adam's up to. Today on the podcast, I'm going to start the first, or maybe you can call it the second, in a series of podcasts on how to race on particular courses on Zwift. My Innsbruck Ring episode that I put out last week got a lot of feedback, and people seem to really like the idea of talking about how to race on particular courses on Zwift and breaking down the course, what to watch out for, where to make moves, and so on. So today I'm going to be talking about probably the course I've raced the most on Zwift, and that's Watopia Flat. I'll also be covering a little bit of news before we get to that, so let's jump right in. The first bit of news, something I also talked about on Zwiftcast with Simon, is the cancellation of the CVR, I guess we call it fall season. This was announced by CVR last week. Today, actually, at the time of recording, I'm recording on Tuesday. Today would have been the first race in this series, so I'm kind of feeling a little bit empty inside, missing these races. This was on July 31st, CVR posted that it's with mixed emotions that CVR World Cup announces it will not be holding a fall season. Big plans for winter season and its associated major coupled with the team that has been running hard over the past 18 months led us to consider this course of action. Seeing that Zwift Academy starts August 6th, and hearing that many people are now racing hard in real life made us finally decide to bypass the fall season. We do not take this decision lightly. CVR World Cup has been gaining significant momentum, and we realize that many athletes modified schedules and got ready for streaming, etc. We appreciate these efforts and that this decision will impact you. Please contact us so that we can work with you on upcoming seasons and, if possible, help reduce the sting of the season being bypassed. Okay, so that was the announcement by CVR World Cup. You know, it had mixed reactions over on Facebook. A lot of people posted up the little sad emoji, and there were comments of all kinds on there. You know, my take on this is ultimately this is CVR's decision. When I spoke with Simon on Zwiftcast, what I said was that now that I've seen live events take place and seen the work that goes into it, I can understand that that Frank, who is the organizer of CVR, that Frank's team is tired. They put a lot of work into the past 2 seasons, and I can see that they would want a little bit of a break. It's unfortunate this happened a week out from the actual series. A little more notice would have given us an opportunity to fill that gap. I don't know about this idea that Zwift Academy would really get in the way of racing on CVR. I have a sense that it's 2 different audiences. To me, the Zwift Academy seems to attract a lot of people who like to do workouts on Zwift, and there are a lot of those people. People who are maybe training for outdoor events or just trying to get fit. I don't see many of the elite racers or people that race regularly doing Zwift Academy. Now, there are some, and this isn't to diminish from Zwift Academy at all. It's an awesome event. I've had a look at some of the workouts that they're doing, and they're tough workouts, and it's definitely a well put together event. But most elite racers on Zwift are not eligible to win Zwift Academy in the sense of becoming a pro. I think the age range is 18 to 21. And realistically, most people racing in CVR, I don't think there was anyone under 21 at the CVR live event. I know very few people from 18 to 21 who are racing elite on Zwift. So I don't know about that idea that Zwift Academy would have interfered with the CVR series. Now I understand that the turnout is a little bit lower in the summer and early part of the fall, but I think with proper promotion they would have been able to put on a proper series here. I don't think it would have been lacking in participants. I know a lot of people were pretty excited, including a lot of people on my team, excited for the start of this fall season. So, but I do understand that it takes a lot of energy to do these, and we'll take CVR's word that they're up to something fun for the winter. I know a team draft. We're really looking forward to the team tour that they've been teasing. So we'll wait until January. I think early January is when they said this will start, and we'll see what the CVR has to offer. So as news comes out about the next CVR season, I'll definitely be talking about it on here. On that note, it does look like WBR, one of the big race organizers on Zwift, is trying to fill the gap left by CVR to some extent. They've announced a WBR Super League series. This is WBR's first ever racing series. It's going to be held on Tuesday, the 7th of August. That's today when I'm recording, so probably too late for you to race if you're listening now. But this is held at 1940 BST. I actually have no idea what time that is. It's the EU time zone. Let me see what that is. 1940. The race is held at roughly the time of the E zone for the EU race. This is 1:40 Central Time. That's where I am. Or 7:40 p.m. British Summer Time. So that's a pretty popular time slot for big races on Zwift. That E zone in CVR always attracts a lot of the really top end racers. So I think they've definitely chosen a good time for it. They'll get European racers, they'll get some Americans who can race in the afternoon. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this Super League series. This is just going to be a test race on Tuesday. We'll see how it goes. We'll have to stay tuned. I'll bring in news if we get more about what WBR is planning with this. We had our In the Pens race this Sunday, and Lionel Vujasin held some amazing power to stay away from the rest of the group. Congratulations, Lionel. Good to see the rest of you out there. I was happy to see my buddy Frank Deal, who I raced a lot on CVR in the last series with, so hope to see some more of you out there. We'll be doing it again this Sunday. I believe it will be Richmond UCI. So we'll see you on the race course. Following up on the Innsbruck Ring podcast that I did last week, I raced 4 laps of the Innsbruck Ring in the TT1 race this weekend, and definitely the kicker on that course, that 45-second to minute and a half climb, whatever it is, depending on your category, is the defining feature of the Innsbruck Ring. And in the race I did, each time we went up there, it was very hard, and it just blew the group up. Definitely attacks over the top were key to keeping the group split up. Slowing down after that climb is just a waste of the effort that you put in. So one thing I recommend, and I'm going to emphasize now, is if you're racing to drop people off of whatever group you're in, and you're the one pushing the pace over that hill, don't let up when you come over the top. Just keep the speed up over the top, because it's very hard for riders off the back of a group to catch a pack on downhill. So it's especially single riders. Single riders trying to catch a group of riders on a downhill is very difficult. So keep the gas on. I'm happy to announce that I won that race, but mostly thanks to my teammates on Team Draft. The TT1 race definitely is getting a lot of hype. This is a race that's going to be turning into the World Team Championship or something like that. I can't remember quite what the name is going to be. It's essentially organized as a team competition series where I think it's going to be the top 3 riders from each team in each category score points for the team, and then they keep, cumulative team points over time. So that's also something to look out for coming in October. One more announcement. At the time of recording, it's Tuesday, and on Wednesday, I will be on Zwift Community Live Wednesday Wind Up. I'll be talking with Nathan and the folks over at Zert. Zert's a training platform that I use, and that is going to be doing some partnering with Zwift Community Live to bring some more insights about the power racers are producing into streams. So if you didn't get a chance to check out the Zwift Community Live Wednesday Wind Up, go back and check it out and see what we're up to with Zert. As things develop with that, I'll talk more on this podcast about it as well. I think that's enough for news. Let's get into talking about the Watopia Flat Course. This is a course, one of the first courses Zwift had, after moving away from Jarvis. Jarvis was kind of the first island that Zwift started with. Jarvis looked like a lima bean. It was just one big loop, and you'd ride around. And at that time, there weren't any races or anything like that. And then we moved to Watopia, and we got some nice new courses. Watopia Flat was one of those courses, and I would race on Watopia Flat probably 2 to 3 times a week when I first started racing on Zwift. If the course was Watopia, you could be pretty much guaranteed that WBR had some race going on Watopia Flat, within an hour of whenever you wanted to race. So this had become kind of a bread and butter course for me. I know it very well. I dream about it, probably have some nightmares about it as well. The course is 10.3 kilometers in length, and it's basically flat. It's not as flat as Richmond Flat. It does have 3 little points that kick up, especially one near the end that we'll talk about. I like to break the course down into kind of 4 sections. So the first 3 kilometers are just like a long flat descent into the tunnel. You start the race and there's the usual blast off. You go flat for a while, and then you descend down under the tunnel, and it's just more flat. This is about 3 kilometers of racing. So like a third of the course is just this long flat descent into and through the tunnel. That section of the course, or this is just how I think about them, that part of the course of how I'm breaking it down ends with the first kind of like key moment in this course, and that is the climb out of the tunnel. So you're underwater, and then you climb out of the tunnel. It's not really a climb. It's just like a little kicker up. It takes maybe 15 seconds or something like that. This one's only 3% average climb, so it's not that steep. The group goes through it very fast. There's still a lot of drafting to happen, but without fail, the group always goes hard up this thing. Okay, and it's because it's an opportunity to drop some of the riders who are maybe struggling to, stay with the group. What I'm going to do is, throughout, whenever I'm talking about a course and I tell you about a key moment, I'm going to give you a cue to be looking out for, to know when that thing's coming, to start to get in position and get ready for however you're going to handle it. And the cue for this climb out of the tunnel is, if you look on the mini map, you'll see that you're going to take a right-hand turn. Okay, so you'll see this big right-hand turn coming. It's a sharp right-hand turn. When you see that coming on the mini-map, that's the point to sort of move to the front of the group and start to prepare for this kicker out of the tunnel. One thing I'll say is I rarely see breakaways form coming out of this tunnel. Now, the group will sometimes split up, but I never see a rider get away alone, or a small group of riders get away alone here. Usually what happens is riders will come off the back of the group here, but riders won't go off the front of the group here. So my advice for this climb out of the tunnel is, don't waste a lot of energy trying to break away here. Okay, you can use your energy if you're trying to maybe get the group smaller, maybe knock some people off the back, especially if you're playing a domestique role. This is a good time to maybe hammer it up this hill, let your teammates sit on your wheel, and just keep a high pace and try to get the group smaller and smaller. But I would recommend not necessarily trying for a breakaway at this moment. One reason is the group knows that this is coming. Okay, so breakaway attempts should, in my opinion, be as much gain for as little work as possible. If the group already knows that there's that things are going to pick up coming out of this tunnel, then your effort is kind of wasted in the sense that you might try to attack here, but the group is already going to start going fast anyway. So the effect of your effort isn't as big as it might be if you surprise the group with an attack later on. So I don't recommend that here. What I recommend is move to the front of the group, maybe start putting the power on a little bit early, maybe move up to the actual front of the group, to the tip of the group, going up this hill a little bit, and then ease off the gas towards the top and let yourself kind of fall back into the group, fall into the draft, and then just stay along. One thing that I warn against is hitting this thing at the back of the group, or especially, coming into this thing gapped from the group at all. If you find yourself gapped from the group or off the back of the group a little bit, heading into this right-hand turn, put some power in early to get back into that group. Don't let them get away from you, because often the power will stay high up over the climb, and you definitely want to be in the group. Because the climb's only 3%, there's some draft to be had, so get in there, get some draft, and stay with the group at this point. Okay, so once you're up out of the tunnel, you essentially go immediately into, there's a dusty section, I think you go over a bridge, and then you're into what I think of as sort of the second part of this course, which is a long false flat. So this is another 3 kilometers. It's about the same amount of distance as the first part of this thing, the long descent. Now you have about 3 kilometers of false flat. Okay, so this is often where the attacks happen. You expect people to go hard coming out of the tunnel, but now you have a long section of 0, 1, 2% grade, slight incline. So the draft effect is going to be a little bit diminished here. There's still plenty of draft, okay? So definitely you want to be in the group at this point. But the draft effect is diminished enough, because the speeds are a little bit slower here due to the climbing, that attacks are a little bit more effective on this false flat section. So often this is the point you'll see sort of surprise attacks or hard efforts that you might not expect. This 3 kilometer false flat ends in another kind of little kicker. Okay, so another maybe 3% kicker, and then immediately into another descent. So this is probably the hardest part of the course, usually the part where people's heart rates are the highest. Through this 3 kilometer section, people like to attack. It gets harder and harder, and then you hit that little kicker at the end, and people tend to go hard up that little bit of a kicker. This is another point where I wouldn't necessarily recommend attacking at that kicker. If you want to attack on this course, I would do it even before that, when it's a bit more unexpected. Okay, so if this is your game plan, is to sort of try and get away at some point on this course, I would recommend trying to get away at some point during this false flat. Not at the kicker, because then you're immediately into a downhill, and the group will very likely catch you. There's still a lot of time before the finish at that point, all right? What I would do here is, the group is tired coming out of that climb from the tunnel. You go over the dirt section and into the climb. This is the point where, see what the group dynamic is doing and think about an attack at this point of the course. So if you want to go for a long attack, I think this is the time to do it. Ending that 3 kilometer section, you have the kicker, and then there's some time to rest. Okay, so you have about 1.5 kilometers of descent from the elevation you've gained over that long false flat. You descend for 1.5 kilometers, and finally you come over a bridge and into the final part of the course, which I'll just call the finale. Okay, so this is the part where at the end of the race, this is where you really want to be paying attention. You come over, you do some descending, and you come over a bridge. This is actually a point to get a power-up if you don't happen to have one. So there are 2 points to get a power-up in this course. One is at the sprint point, which is, I believe, just before the bridge starts, and the other is, at the start-finish line. Ooh, one thing I'll say about the false flat is the cue to look out for coming into the kicker at the end of that false flat section is, during the false flat, you do 2 big S turns. So you take a big sweeping left, a big sweeping right, and then a big sweeping left again. That kicker at the end of this false flat section comes right after you take the second big sweeping left-hand turn. So on your mini-map, you'll see the sweeping left-hand turn, the second one. At that point, you might want to move up to the front of the group and get ready for this little kicker before you start the descent. So coming down the descent over the bridge, I think the bridge itself is the main cue for the final key moment of this course, which is the kicker before the final S turns into the sprint. This is the steepest part of the course. It's like a 5% kicker. It's not very long. It's maybe 10 or 15 seconds. Definitely not as long as the climb in Innsbruck. It's not even as long as the kicker on London Classique. But it does get hard, and people go hard up it, especially on the last climb. The cue is you come down over the bridge, and then you're going to take a right-hand turn up over the kicker. The bridge is definitely the point where you want to manage your position in the pack. I recommend, again, for all of these kickers, come to the front of the group. Okay, don't sit at the back of the group, because if a gap does form, you're going to be fighting through those gaps that form. You want to be near the front. Put the power on early, and then ease off and let yourself fall into the pack at the top. Again, I don't think that this 5% kicker is the place to attack on this course. Everyone knows it's hard there, so people are going to be looking out for attacks. It's not long enough that you can really get very far away. It's a good place for people to drop off the group, but I rarely see attacks that start on this kicker succeed until the end, because people expect it. Now, one thing that you can try if you want to attack is, if you have an arrow power up, one thing I have seen successful before is to attack just over the top of this thing, hit the arrow power up, and then attack into the downhill. So this kicker goes immediately into a pretty steep downhill. You pick up some speed quickly. So the arrow power up is going to be more effective whenever you're going faster. So hit the arrow power up at the top of this kicker and try to get as much distance as you can through the S curves or the S's as possible. This would be what I recommend as maybe a place to go for a long range attack. Of course, because I'm saying it, it might not be surprising to people. People might expect it here, but you've gone over this kicker, people are tired. You don't always expect an attack to come when you're tired, when the group is tired. But that's a good place to do it, because you've got the element of surprise, you have the benefit of the arrow power-up being a little bit more powerful when you're going downhill, and then you have, a pretty good fast descent to utilize that arrow power-up for 30 seconds, and try to stay away from the group. So that would be my recommendation there. If that's not your game plan, if your game plan is to try and make it to the sprint, this is a point to really watch out. So come over the top of this thing, try and stick with the front of the group as best you can. Okay, so it's going to be hard. Everyone goes hard here. Put in the power now, because there's a pretty good descent into the sprint, and you'll have some time to rest. From the top of the kicker, there's something like 2 kilometers left in the race. So there's a lot of time to rest still and prepare for the sprint. Stay with the group, stay with, the front of the group, and just watch for gaps to open and close them as quickly as possible. And just try to recover before the sprint. The sprint in this thing is pretty standard, so you carry a lot of speed into it because you have a long downhill and you come under this rock archway. At this point you have about 800 meters to go, and you're still carrying a ton of speed from the downhill from after the kicker. So these S-turns, or the S's as they call them, are super fast, and you carry a lot of speed into the sprint. Once you hit this rock archway, there's still a little bit of descent left. Okay, so I wouldn't recommend long-range attacks at this point. I almost never see long-range attacks work on Watopia Flat, and that's because you do carry so much speed in. The effort you put in isn't as effective. If you're gonna do one, I recommend, you've got to have an arrow helmet to make a long-range attack work on this thing. I wouldn't expect to be able to do it without one. So you come under this rock archway. At this point, there's about 800 meters to go. Again, don't be too eager. There's a lot of speed going into this thing. Just get yourself into position. It's not a time to really get too antsy. There's a lot of distance to go before the sprint at this point. So you come under the rock archway, get yourself in position, and start looking at the rider list to see who's going to make a move. From here, there's a slight left-hand bend. So you come under the rock archway, there's a slight left-hand bend, and then a big sweeping right-hand bend into the finish line. So you won't see the finish line coming until you're even close to like 200 meters away, because you have this sweeping right-hand bend into it. So it's always sort of right around the corner. So here you really need to know when you're going to pull your arrow helmet, if you have one, and when you're going to pull the trigger on your sprint. Okay, so if you're the kind of person who wants to be the first to make a move on a sprint, you really have to have a landmark in mind. So just as a rule of thumb for using the arrow helmet, what I recommend is like I said, you come under the rock archway, you take a slight left-hand bend and then into a sweeping right-hand bend. Try hitting the arrow helmet right at the start of that sweeping right-hand bend. At this point, you probably have about, depending on the speed of your group, you probably have about 30 seconds left into the finish line, and the arrow helmet lasts about 30 seconds, so you'll get the most use of it possible. This is also the time to really look for the start of the sprint, okay? You want to be on it because people will try to attack early under that archway and even through the SEs. You want to be paying attention throughout that, just to sit on wheels, close gaps as quickly as possible, but, I really recommend not trying to execute your sprint until at least the start of this right-hand bend, if you're someone looking to do a sprint. Now again, there's always an element of surprise at trying things early. Don't get locked into some tactic just because I say it works. That's my experience. I don't see a lot of long attacks working on Watopia Flat. That doesn't mean they can't work. Coming on this sweeping right-hand bend, pull the trigger on your arrow helmet, and just start to think about where you want to sprint. The nice thing here is there are meter markers, so you get the 300 meter and so on. There are plenty of cues to look out for in making your sprint work here. Again, because this is kind of a blind sprint, you have to trust what you're doing. As soon as you pull the trigger on your sprint, just go for it, right? Put the power in early and just try to hold it to the line. Okay, so that's a summary of how to race on Watopia Flat. I hope I didn't miss anything. Let me just reiterate that, just because I'm saying something works for me or is my experience, doesn't mean you shouldn't experiment with trying new tactics. I definitely recommend if I say something on the podcast that is different than your experience, if you've made long-range attacks work on Watopia, definitely post up in the Pens listeners and, tell us how you do it. See what works for you. Give me some feedback on whether this stuff is helpful to you, whether it's consistent with what you've learned in racing this course, and also what courses you'd like to see or hear me talk about in the future. That's all for the show this week. I hope you enjoyed the content. As always, you can find us at inthepens.com and interact with us on Facebook at In the Pens Listeners. See you in the pens. That's all for the show this week. I hope you enjoyed the content. As always, you can find us at inthepens.com and interact with us on Facebook at In the Pens Listeners.